Hey, it's Jose. Thanks for joining me on my journey to I Am. I've been meaning to make this video for some time, but I have been sick. My kids got sick first, and then I got sick, and it was a sinus cold, so it was pretty bad, and I just didn't sound like myself, so I waited until I'm better. So here I am. Welcome back for the people who have been here before, and for those of you who are new, I grew up as a convert Jehovah's Witness child from the time I was 5 till I was about 19. When I was 12, I went through, began going through for baptism because my brother had gone through for baptism. And as I was reading the baptism book, I think it was called Organized to Do Jehovah's Will, I realized about the provision of disfellowshipping. That's when you can be shunned for basically anything that you're doing wrong, probably particularly like anything you read in that Organized to Do Jehovah's Will book, you had to just follow all that stuff. So I didn't join. I just chose not to join. Now, right around the same time that I discovered about disfellowshipping, like shortly after, my mom was disfellowshipped. And for the next few years, she actually got disfellowshipped like 3 times during my adolescent years. And she got reinstated, and she's still a Jehovah's Witness today. Now, subconsciously, I did believe all that stuff for a long time, like all their teachings, their Bible teachings, especially Armageddon, like to the point where I had nightmares. But I did leave the faith behind when I was about 19, and I became agnostic. And then in my 30s, I had a work accident that led me to have PTSD from, like, I was diagnosed with PTSD from my childhood because of that accident. But all those changes caused me to have a shock, and this shock actually allowed me to open my mind to be able to be aware of things that I hadn't known previously. So some things did happen that changed my view of spirituality, but that's for another video. In my last video, I shared that I had found out what my PTSD trigger was, and I asked for guidance from you, the viewers. So in this video, I'm going to share what some of the viewers shared with me, and also the information that I found for myself while I was researching on how to help myself. First of all, I want to give a shout out to Coco at XJW Unbaptized Publisher. Her style that she brings to the table is real, and the energy is good. If you get a chance to go see her, she's pretty good. I also want to thank June XJW for sharing with me her PTSD story and the book suggestion of Healing the Shame That Binds You by John Bradshaw. I've ordered a copy. It's on its way. I also want to thank KB, who suggested the YouTube channel Crappy Childhood Fairy. It deals with PTSD, and also CPTSD, which is the childhood PTSD. Now, on to my research. First off, I went to the internet and I typed in PTSD. It came back with a website that covered the 5 stages of PTSD, which I thought was ironic because the website's out of Australia, right? So it's actually thebanyans.com, and I will put a link in my description box. They have like 5 stages of PTSD. Those 5 stages are the impact emergency state, the denial numbing state, the rescue state, the short-term recovery state, and the long-term recovery state. I'll briefly go through these. The impact and energy state is when people struggle to deal with what happened. The denial numbing stage is the 2nd stage, and so initially the mind may protect itself to eliminate stress and anxiety by numbing out and denying that the event even happened. But for the mind to move on, it's important to face the trauma, or at least begin to face it. The most helpful action in this stage is to get treatment from a professional, whether it's a counselor or a psychologist. And then the rescue stage comes next, where you start to accept what happened. It's good to do exposure therapy while still dealing with the distress and shock from the original trauma. This phase is the most destructive, but that's what is needed for a person to allow themselves to confront that trauma. I'm sure you've heard of the saying, out of chaos comes order, right? It's actually the 2nd law of thermodynamics. face the unintentional impact that you have on others. So we impact others by how we act. So, and then it is normal to feel denial, confusion, despair, and hopelessness in this stage. The fourth stage is short-term recovery, where people begin to recover because they begin to understand how trauma affects their lives. This can cause two things to happen, where either people can be humbled by the amount of support that they're receiving, or people are disappointed by the lack of care and concern shown by other people. Usually life will take a turn for the positive at this point because we're making and implementing a plan to release the PTSD. And common emotions in this stage are stress, fatigue, and irritability. The last stage is long-term recovery. It's the reconstruction phase where hope is developed. Greater awareness of your trauma and triggers allow you to successfully cope with techniques that come quicker to mind in dealing with these symptoms. This stage can last a long time, and triggers can actually regress our thinking in that moment. But by continuing to use personal strategies developed, a person can move forward in living their lives. Next, I looked up what to do once you find out what your PTSD triggers are. And I got a website, therecoveryvillage.com. And they have a 6-step recovery system. They have cognitive behavioral therapy, known as CBT, prolonged exposure therapy, group therapy, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, medication, and family therapy. So the first one being CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy. It's essentially talk therapy. You can continue using a trained professional, but friends and family can be helpful in this situation too. But the trained professionals can actually point out patterns of behavior that are exhibited by us because they're looking from the outside, so they could see things that we might not because we're dealing objectively. And they will give us techniques on how to deal with the upcoming changes because there's always change, right? Number 2, prolonged exposure therapy. So it's exposure to thinking about the trauma. So you're making yourself think about it, which can be difficult in times of PTSD. I know this. But it can also be actual physical exposure to the place where the trauma occurred. So when I had a work accident in 2007, I couldn't drive anywhere near the building. I couldn't see the people. I couldn't even head down the road in the direction of the building. And if somebody else was driving that was unaware of my issue, I would actually have to close my eyes until I knew that I wasn't even going to see the building. It took me some years of exposure therapy to actually, and now I can drive by the place and not have panic attacks. So it does work. The third is group therapy. So essentially it's just talk therapy in a group session, which can help because sometimes when we listen to other people, we just know we're not alone, or, even they could give us advice. We can get advice from them if our situations are similar. Okay, the fourth one is EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. One's a little bit different. And it can occur once you're actually stabilized. You don't want to do this type of treatment if you're still in a state where you're using drugs or panicking. You want to wait until you've kind of gotten over that point. The goal is to reconnect your personality as a whole. And they use a few things to do that. They use the exposure therapy. They continue to recall the event in your mind. They'll bring up the event and walk you through it. There's also bilateral eye stimulation where you're moving your eyes. Like, I guess if you move your eyes from side to side, you can actually reset your brain, like a reset button. And then there's tapping. So I don't know if you've heard of this tapping. It's called emotional freedom technique. Like, I've seen this tapping where, people tap like this, or they tap like this and on your chin. Like, I've heard of this before, but essentially what they're doing is they're balancing the energy that's flowing or blocked in your body. So not sure how it works, but they're realizing that this works. The fifth one is medication. I mean, this speaks for itself. This hasn't worked for me, and this is where I started, because I went to the doctor first, and they prescribed depression medication and sedatives. This just left me feeling foggy all the time with a lot of headaches. Straight up, I took a lot of pills to try to fix myself until I actually began to research the conditions that I had. Then I was able to just stop the pills. The last one is family therapy. So in my opinion, though, if you have a family that's willing to do this, you're likely gonna succeed in getting better. Because then you're all, like, the whole system, your whole family system would be getting healed. All right, so now at this point, I'm going to share some of my personal knowledge that I've picked up over the years. Firstly, it's very important to keep your thoughts in the present. It's called the present. It's a gift. I mean, it's the present, right? So be in the moment. Accept your gift and be present. Because what happens is when you're thinking about the past, usually you'll either feel regret or guilt about the choices you either didn't make or the choices you did make. Now, thinking about the past can result in anxiety because you're likely worrying about what hasn't even happened yet. So an example is waiting for Armageddon. This can actually cause anxiety in people. It certainly did me. All right, so secondly, when we're in situations of stress, okay, the amygdala, which is like it's a tiny little part in your brain about this big, and it's right in the center of your head, like right back in the center of your brain. And the amygdala is the part of the brain that takes over when you're under situations of stress. And it only leaves 3 brain actions available to you. You can either freeze, fight, or flight. I call them the 3 Fs. I'm sure somebody else does too, but fight, flight, or freeze. Okay, so what happens is that the parts of the brain that rationalize, like your frontal lobe, they literally stop working. You can't make a rational decision, or a reasonable one at that, because you literally can't think. And that's where awareness of this comes in. Okay, so for me, when I'm faced with the 3 Fs, I stop breathing. I literally stop breathing. I hold my breath, and then within a few minutes, panic sets in because my body needs oxygen to function. Remember the old saying, don't hold your breath, right? And I know that the metaphor is supposed to be that you don't expect something to happen, even though it's been suggested that it will. Let me use it in an example. Don't hold your breath that Armageddon's coming. Okay? All right, so in those times of the 3F stress, what I do is I concentrate on my breathing. The type of breathing that I do has several names that it's commonly known by. It's known by box breathing. My psychologist actually, who has a university degree, she's got a master's degree, she had introduced me to box breathing. My daughter's rehab that she just went to in November called it square breathing. Same thing. The oldest source that I found this technique, I actually seen this in a book not long ago. I own a book from the 1920s, and it's called the fourfold breath. So this was the oldest source. But in the yoga practice, it's called Smavriti Pranayama. And it is even used in the Navy SEALs to train their highly technical individuals. All right, so what you do is you breathe in slowly in your nose on a count of 4. So then you hold it for 4. You release it slowly through your mouth on a count of 4. Then once your lungs are empty, you just hold that empty lungs for a count of 4. And you repeat it. Okay, so you just do it again. As your lungs gain capacity, you can actually increase this to 5, 6, 7 seconds or more if you want to. But within 5 to 10 cycles of breaths, my anxiety will dissipate and my brain is able to fully function again. Okay, so this is where I'm going to leave off on this subject. There's always more to learn, but this is good for today. I want to thank you for joining me on my journey to I Am. I hope I was able to be of service to you today. And as always, I love you because I love me. Have a great week, and may you learn something new today. Bye.